drive down here. It's just a good morning. Enjoyed seeing all your faces. You know, we're probably missing a few. Something about a holiday weekend and beautiful weather that just draws people to the closest lake or pond or cookout center or whatever. But hope that God is blessing them there and enjoying that fellowship time. And I'm enjoying the time here. Interesting morning. I'm sitting over here, and you may have noticed that at some point I actually sat down and started writing something. There are times when I come into a church service and I know exactly where I'm going with the message, and then all of a sudden God just grabs hold of me and shakes me and says, "No, I want you to talk about something else." Well, our text is going to be the same. Excuse me. Some of what God put on my heart, He tweaked a little bit this morning. And it comes directly from the music that we were singing. Did anybody sing a song this morning you just really love? Okay, but let's just call these out. What was your favorite song? The one with the good beat. I can musically build our church. Oh, build our kingdom here. Build your kingdom here. Okay, yeah, that's a great song. Anybody else? I'll Fly. Who does not like that song? Isn't that a great song?
But I changed the words. I sing it all the time.
You do?
According to John 11:25, if we believe, we will never die.
There you go.
So I say, I won't die, hallelujah.
Okay, awesome.
I sing it every time I get my car goes
How about that song, I Believe?
somewhere.
Anybody like that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
I like them all.
I enjoyed the music selection. Yeah, it's a little bit different. Our praise team had the day off today. That's okay. But I enjoyed those songs. But there is a problem that sometimes shows up when we, first of all, sing songs that we dearly love. And secondly, sing songs that become ultra familiar. Aside from I'll Fly Away, most of the songs we sing today, you can now sing them with those same tunes and the same singers in your car driving down the road. Because Christian radio has made that popular. This isn't a sermon against Christian radio. But it is something about familiarity. That sometimes we become so familiar we miss what these songs are saying. And so I'm going to point out the last three songs that we sang. And each of them were mentioned here. But some questions come to mind that are directly part of where we're going today. And if, in case you've missed it, we're going to be in Acts chapter 9. It's a familiar passage. So if you want to stick your finger in your Bible, you can go ahead and do that while we have this little discussion. So I'm going to start from the end and move forward. The last song was probably the most familiar, right? I'll Fly Away. It's a beautiful sentiment, isn't it? That there's going to be this point in time where while the body might die, the spirit lives and we go to be with Jesus for eternity. Now, there's some good parts to that. There's also some theological issues with the song that we don't think about. Did you know the Bible doesn't really talk about going to heaven when we die? It talks about going to be with Jesus, but it also talks about a new resurrection and a new earth, right? The end of the story is not life after death in heaven. It's life after death. That there is this, our spirit going to be with Jesus until He returns and establishes His kingdom, His physical, literal kingdom here on earth. And that our spirit is reunited with a new, resurrected body. If you didn't read to the end of the story, I'm sorry, I just gave it all away. But that's the case. And there's a lot of theology that kind of becomes this escapist thing. It's like, it'll all be okay, because in the end, I'll fly away, and this world doesn't really matter. And we want to be careful of that. And that can be the difficult thing, a song like I'll Fly Away, is that we get so focused on the flying away that we forget that God isn't done here yet and that we have a part to play. The song before that is a powerful song. Its lyrics, though, in our movement, the Restoration Movement, independent Christian churches, churches of Christ, may not be as familiar to us as it is to some denominations. You say, why is that? I read my Bible. Well, the reason is that the lyrics predate our movement in a creed. It's called the Disciples' Creed. And the Disciples' Creed is something that it affirms the biblical faith of disciples. They formulated the Disciples' Creed in the early days of the church, long before our movement in America started. But our movement started as kind of this anti-creedal thing. We don't want to develop something that's against, that can be used against the Bible. And there are some denominations that chose to look at creeds, like the Disciples' Creed, more than they looked at Scripture itself, which that's a problem. But what the song says, and the reason why we resonate with it, is that it's saying, you know what, I believe. I believe in God the Father. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe in the Holy Spirit. And He's given us new life. Not in the same way, but the Disciples' Creed affirms all those things. And it talks about the crucifixion, Jesus rising from the dead, and that He's coming back. All lines in that song. But there are some parts of that song that I wonder if we really mean. So let our faith be more than anthems, greater than songs we sing. And in our weakness and temptation, let the lost be found and the dead be raised. In the here and now, let love invade. Let the church live loud. Our God will see that we believe. We believe. The gates of hell will not prevail. Right out of Matthew 16. For the power of God has torn the veil. Right at Jesus' dying breath. Now we know your love will never fail. We believe. We believe. Those are beautiful lyrics. All alluded to in the Disciples' Creed. All part of what ancient faith we hold. A faith that started upon creation of this world and then was redeemed through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. Singing, we believe this to be true, and we're allowing it to become the fabric of our life. But do we believe? Belief. The definition of belief is faith that leads to obedient action. Do we allow those things to become who we are? And then, before that, we sang the song, and many of you said, oh yeah, it's the song with the good beat. It's the song that we love. Yeah. I heard this song the first time when I was in Texas. I was introduced to it by our worship minister. I think most of you met her, Sherry Tessar. She visited a while back. Was involved in the worship team. I found it a very challenging song then, and it hasn't changed. Build your kingdom here. It's a song asking for God to move. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. Win this nation back. Set your church on fire. And sometimes I wonder if we really understand these things that we're asking for and what they mean about our life. Because God isn't ready for you to fly away just yet. And He says, good, you believe, great. Let's have a conversation on what it means to build my kingdom here. Because it may not mean what you think it means. A few weeks ago, I shared a little clip from The Princess Bride. And in it, Inigo Montoya says to one of the other characters, you keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. And what we find in today's text is that a disciple of Jesus finds out that following Jesus means more than he thought it did. It requires a certain level of investment. That if we're not careful, the songs that we sing are going to go right over our heads, and the depth of the theology in them is not going to sink into our hearts. And that's not what I believe God wants for us. Acts chapter 9 begins with one of the most familiar stories in all of Scripture. A guy by the name of Saul, who later we find he also goes by the name Paul and becomes a pretty important person in the second part of the book of Acts. But at this point, he is the villain. He is morally opposed to everything that the Church of Jesus stands for. In chapter 8, we learned at the very beginning of the chapter, he was seeking to destroy the church. He was locking people up for faith in Jesus. The reason was that they were saying Jesus was the Messiah. Paul, as a prized student of Gamaliel, a Pharisee of Pharisees, he would write about himself in another book of the Bible that he wrote. He was somebody who was trying to keep the Jewish faith pure, and he saw Jesus as a threat. And so now that he's kind of clearing the church out of Jerusalem, he gets letters to go to the next closest big town, Damascus. And he gets letters from the leaders of the Jewish faith that basically give him permission to go and arrest individuals who they knew were leading the church. See, the church wasn't being quiet about who they were. They were going to their Jewish friends and family and saying, look, Jesus is the one we've been waiting for. And so news spread. Their names were known. It was not hard to compile a hit list. And Paul was leading that charge. So he gathers some soldiers, and they march to Damascus. And it's there on that road he has an experience where a great light from heaven shines down and blinds him. And he hears a voice saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? He falls from his horse, blinded, and says, what? Who am I talking to? What's going on? And the voice says, this is Jesus, whom you are persecuting. So Saul has a one-on-one encounter with the resurrected Jesus Christ. And what he experiences is totally against everything he thought or believed. He thought this whole Jesus thing was a hoax. And he was stunned, blinded, shattered. And Jesus gives him some instructions to go into Damascus, but rather than pursuing the church, tells him to go to a guy named Judas's house. Now, not Judas Iscariot, that guy's long gone. He never made it to Damascus. But instead, to go to this other guy named Judas, who lived on Straight Street. I just want to point out, the Bible doesn't often give us street locations, but here it's very specific. Saul later finds out that the guards, the soldiers who were there, they didn't hear any of this. But they did experience the blinding light. And they're all confused. Saul goes, he follows these instructions because he can't make sense of it at all. And he goes and he doesn't eat or drink for the next 3 days. And then what God does next, he introduces a new character into the story. Somebody who they knew well. Somebody who probably had his name on that hit list Saul was carrying. Later, he became known as the first bishop of Damascus. This guy was a heavy hitter when he came to the early church. He was a strong leader. And Jesus reaches out to him. If you'll join me in verse 10, of chapter 9 of Acts. In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. This is the second time we've met somebody named Ananias in the book of Acts. There was another guy named Ananias and Sapphira. That was in Jerusalem, and he wasn't such a good character. He lied to the Holy Spirit and such. This is a different Ananias. Ananias was kind of like Joseph, or even Jesus. It was somewhat a common name among the Jewish people. But I want you to catch, in Damascus there was a disciple. We throw that word around sometimes. Well, there were the 12 disciples. They followed Jesus, yes. But a disciple is not just somebody who has faith or is a casual follower. A disciple is somebody who patterns their entire life after their rabbi. And so when we say, I'm a disciple of Jesus, we are making a statement about the way we live our life. And we need to ask ourselves, do I really believe that? Am I really going to allow Jesus to shape how I live, shape what I think about the family, what I think about our society, what I think about the church, what I think about relationships with other people? Am I going to allow him to shape the way I live? That's what disciple means. But a disciple also might get called upon by their rabbi to do things, to carry out a mission on their behalf, to share a message, to reach out to somebody we don't necessarily want to. In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, Ananias. Yes, Lord, he answered. And the Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street. Man, he's specific. Get out your GPS, find out where Straight Street is, and get over there. And ask for a man of Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. Saul of Tarsus was a name that was wreaking havoc in all the Christians. You see, we find out in the beginning of chapter 8 that Saul was persecuting the church in Jerusalem, and the church, many of its members, fled. Guess where many of them went to? Damascus. This guy didn't need a longer introduction than Saul of Tarsus. This is terrifying stuff. And God's saying, hey, I want you to go talk to this guy. In a vision, this is the Lord speaking to Ananias, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands and restore his sight. He's saying, you're going to perform a miracle for me. Both figuratively and literally. I want you to put yourself in Ananias' shoes. Jesus has just asked him to reach out to the one who's throwing your friends, family, church members in jail. He held the coats when Stephen, this upcoming preacher and deacon of the church, was stoned to death. His reputation precedes him. Do you do this? Look at these next words. Lord, Ananias answered, I've heard many reports about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. And you might say, well, arrest doesn't sound that bad. You're going to throw him in jail. No, that's not the way it works. First of all, if they weren't Roman citizens, Rome wasn't going to come in and make sure their rights were taken care of. Number two, if you were arrested, you were not arrested until you could have a fair trial. You were arrested until a trial could be held, and then there would be a punishment. See, they didn't have what we have in the United States, this long-term incarceration plan. You were going to be punished, which might be a whipping, a scourging, which would lead you close to death, or it could just be, we're going to kill you. threat. You weren't going to get an attorney to defend you. The fact that you were seen as being part of the church, the Jewish faith would say, oh, they're apostate. They've run away from the true faith. And they're over. They see you as dead to them because they don't acknowledge Jesus. Back then, this was the end of the story. They weren't going to have a conversation. And so, it sounds like Ananias is really questioning Jesus. Are you sure about this? I mean, I know you're the king and all, but come on. This doesn't sound real good. Is this doubt? Is this unbased questioning? Have you ever prayed this prayer? I bet on some level you might have. You've been following Jesus for any length of time. This idea that he's got something for you to do. And sometimes that thing that he wants you to do is not what you want to do. I want you to forgive this person. I want you to ask forgiveness. I want you to work for peace in this situation. I want you to respond to what you saw as a slap in the face by turning the other cheek and swallowing the pride. I want you to live in meekness. That's restrained strength. I want you to trust that I have this healing. I can almost guarantee you that if you follow Jesus for any length of time, he's going to ask something of you that's not going to sit well. Because it goes against the grain of our pride, our view of the world. And we can try to rationalize his instructions away. Well, yeah, I'm supposed to forgive as I've been forgiven. But this is more than Jesus would say, right? Remember, Jesus asked for the forgiveness of the people who nailed him to the cross, who hurled insults at him. And in so doing, he asked for the forgiveness of every person who ever did. He never moved. We can try to rationalize, yeah, but this isn't really a life or death situation. It could be life or death to a relationship. God wants me to be happy. Well, yeah, but he also wants to be the source of that happiness. Not our own source. God wants our situation to not dwell on the negative. Sometimes God will use the negative to reach a much better positive than we ever could. See, discipleship begins with listening to God and processing what he's asking us to do, what he's asking us to be. It's an invitation to invest our life in his kingdom before it is fully manifest. When we sing, "Build your kingdom here," do we also see that we are asking him to start here, right here, in our heart, in our mind? Build your kingdom here. Ask of me to be your subject, because I believe that you are the king. See, following Jesus is about personal kingdom investment, not just flying away when we die, heading off to heaven. Christianity is not about going to heaven when we die. Christianity is about following Jesus faithfully until his kingdom is firmly established. Now, when we die, we will be with him for eternity. But that disembodied experience will be but for a moment, because he is going to build a new earth and a new heavens, and they will be united by the source of light. His name is Jesus. If you doubt me, read it. It appears in the Old Testament, the book of Isaiah. It appears in the New Testament in several different places, but most explicitly in the book of Revelation. Following Jesus is about personal kingdom investment. It's about putting our life now on deposit in Jesus' hands by following Him obediently and expecting Him to take care of the details. This is a terrifying thing. Just think about Ananias. Think about what's going through his mind. As he said, yeah, I know who he is. I want you to do this. Now, think about the people in your life, in the fractured relationships, and the things that have been lost over time, and how God is calling you to do what you can to represent Him as a kingdom ambassador for Him. Might God be asking you to do the unthinkable? To have a conversation with the person that you would never want to even see? I'm pretty sure that Ananias, as he's pouring his heart out to God, says, Lord, I don't even want to be in the same room as this guy. He can ruin me. Do you imagine what Ananias is thinking? Sure, I go and I lay hands on Saul and I restore his sight. What's to keep him from just arresting me or even killing me on the spot? Even worse yet, Saul could fake Christianity in order to be welcomed into the church, and then he takes them out because he knows all where they hide. He can be shunned. But Ananias, who had been respected, could be shunned by welcoming in the enemy of the church. So his reputation might be hurt. There are so many ways that this could go south for Ananias. And you know that they had to be building up, and he's wrestling with what those rumors could develop into. And they all turn out badly. And that's even if Saul doesn't kill him or throw him in jail. Yet the request was made. The command was shared. I want you to go to him. Might God be asking you to do something like that? Might He be asking you to invest in places you've never invested? To start looking at relationships that you have in a different light? To start opening yourself up to the fact that you, if you truly believe, as we just sang, and you are asking God to build His kingdom here, and that you would be part of it, that He has an expectation of you to be part of it. And not just that we're going to fly away someday. See, disciples and disciple makers ask God discerning questions rather than doubting questions. I don't think that Ananias' questions were just questions of doubt. There's probably a healthy fear in there. Not necessarily fear of the situation, but fear like, Lord, are you asking me what I think you're asking me? Jesus put it a different way. Count the cost. His question is discerning the cost. He's trying to wrap his head around what this might mean. And this is what disciples do. They understand the weight of the situation, and so they begin to ask. In the book of James, chapter 1, verse 5 and 6, it says this: if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. That's what he was doing. He doesn't understand the request, so he's asking God to define it. You should ask God for wisdom, who gives generously to all without finding fault. And it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Jesus put it a different way. He's defining prayer in John 14. verses 16 and 17. He says, "And I will ask my Father, and he will give you another advocate." Counselor. There's no real good translation for the word for advocate there. We tend to see it as the Holy Spirit. The Greek word is paraklete. It is advocate, defender, counselor, guide. It's all those things. There's no one English word that covers it all. But we understand that he's talking about the Holy Spirit. I will give you another advocate, the Holy Spirit, who will help you and be with you forever. The Spirit of truth. The world cannot accept him because it neither sees him nor knows him. But you will know him, for he lives with you and will be in you. When the church was born, we read about this in Acts chapter 2, verse 38, when the disciples choose to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, repent of their sin, and are immersed into Christ. It says that they receive the gift of the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, the advocate, the defender, the guide, the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete. And so that's what Ananias is doing. He said, "Lord, I need some guidance here. I need some wisdom. I need to understand what you're really asking me to do because I'm terrified." And so God does. Verse 15 and 16. "But the Lord said to Ananias, 'Go, this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name.'" Okay, so there's a pretty clear discussion there about God's plans for Saul. What's missing in God's explanation? Sorry? Yeah, there are no plans for Ananias. There's no assurance he's going to be safe. There's no discussion. Don't worry, I've got you a get out of jail free card. It's going to be just fine. He just says, I've got plans for this man. Kingdom plans. My kingdom plans. But it's going to require your kingdom investment. He doesn't tell Ananias it's going to be easy. There's no mention of any other followers of Jesus that are even going to understand this. Discipleship is rarely convenient. Lloyd Belfry, one of the founders of the school I worked for in his late 80s, still teaches. Brilliant man. A little over a decade ago, when I was a student at Central, I was talking to him about a situation going on at the church I was leading in High Hill, Missouri. It was a discipleship, difficult thing, trying to help someone in need. It just wasn't going well. And it seemed to be disrupting every aspect of my life, the life of most of the leaders of this church. I was telling Lloyd Belfry about it, and he said something, the most understated thing. He said, ministry is seldom convenient. He's right. Ministry almost always requires an investment of time, often money, sometimes reputation, and sometimes a willingness to say, this is just what God is asking me to do. He doesn't promise people will understand. And he doesn't promise it'll be easy. But in this case, his expectation of Ananias is one that is like, my kingdom objective is to lead this person to me so he will follow me. And he's going to do great things, but it's going to require you to do more than you understand. How many of you have heard of Billy Graham's sermon? In the history of the United States, the last 100 years, there probably is not a single preacher who has impacted our nation. How many of you have heard the man who led him to Christ? Yeah, me neither. But I know his name. He was a revivalist preacher named Mordecai Ham. Yeah, H-A-M. And he led Billy Graham in a revival to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. It's no wonder that Billy Graham made his reputation as America's preacher as a revivalist. These huge revival conversions, right? And we know who Billy Graham is. We don't know who this other guy is. I don't know that leading Billy Graham to Jesus was any difficult thing. I don't know what might have stood in the way for him. I don't know if there were any reasons why Mordecai would need to be scared. But I know this. He had no way of knowing what would become of that. Well, we have this passage of Scripture, the slide before, where God assures Ananias that he has plans for Saul. He didn't understand fully what this meant. He didn't know that Saul would later be more known as Paul, and then he would write a third of the New Testament. He didn't know he was going to invent the concept of church planting, missionary work. He didn't know. Mordecai Ham didn't know what leading Billy Graham to Jesus was going to do either. And you don't know what your kingdom investment might do. You don't. But it doesn't change the fact that God is asking it of you. You see, listening to God will always lead to a choice between personal investment and a kingdom investment strategy. Where are you going to invest your time, your relationships, your finances, your reputation, your skills, your abilities? When Jesus defines discipleship, he says, anyone who comes after me to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up your cross and follow me. He's defining this. You're going to choose to deny your personal plan, your personal kingdom, and choose my kingdom to invest in. And so ultimately the question is, are we going to invest in God's kingdom? Are we going to take serious this investment in other people? For Ananias, the story continues on. He comes in, lays hands on Saul. He tells him, he calls him brother, first of all. Brother, I've been sent here by God so that you may be healed. He heals him. And with that, the prophecy that Jesus himself had spoken to Saul becomes true. You can only imagine the conversation about who Jesus is and the way he lives and changes lives. That he truly is the Messiah goes on. And very quickly, Saul is baptized into Christ. The very next day, he starts preaching in the synagogue, proclaiming the one he was out to destroy as his Lord and Savior. Because of Ananias' kingdom investment. And you and I, we may never experience that kind of absolute directive where God says, I want you to go talk to this person at this address, and I want you to heal them of their blindness, and I want you to do this and this and this. That may never happen. But it doesn't mean that we haven't been given instructions. The New Testament is filled with instructions of kingdom investment. To go and make disciples of Jesus. That means we live as followers of Jesus and invite other people to do the same. That we live as peacemakers. That we live as people who hunger and thirst for righteousness in every aspect of our lives. And wherever possible, we live at peace so that we can pass on the peace that Jesus provides, sharing with them what a life-changing relationship is. Now today, if you're listening to this message, you probably fall into one of three categories. So which type of listener are you? Number one, you're one who accepted Jesus, but you need to invest yourself in other people. Invest yourself in God's kingdom and sharing what you have learned. By doing so, you step into this role of being a disciple maker. Number two, maybe you're somebody who is doing church, but are you investing in the kingdom? I find that most of us in our movement fall into this category very quickly. Just by doing church, taking part in activities that the church does, we're like, okay, I've got it going on, I'm good. But a lot of times, church doesn't ask nearly as much of us as Jesus does. And so we settle for a bar that's not as high as what Jesus is asking us to reach for. And we say, no, it's okay, Jesus will forgive us. That's true. But that also means that we may not be investing in the kingdom the way that Jesus is asking us to. And the third group, maybe you're somebody who recognizes you need someone to invest in you. Maybe you haven't taken your first steps in following Jesus. Maybe you recognize that, like Paul, you're blind. You can't see what this relationship really looks like. And you need somebody to walk with you in the steps towards following Jesus so you can begin to make that your life as well. In any of those three, we have clear action steps. Number one, you've accepted Jesus, but you need to invest. Start praying. Who is it that God has placed in your life that you can begin to share this life-transforming gift you've been given in a relationship with Jesus? How can you be his hands and feet to the people who are around you, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your workplace? Maybe if you're number two, Lord, give me the courage and the desire to do more than just church, just show up on Sunday, but instead to live my faith 7 days a week and to revive that fire I had in me early on. This is where we're singing not just I believe, but build your kingdom here in my heart and in my mind so that I may be an active ambassador for you. Number three, if you fall into this category, here in just a moment, I'm going to finish closing this message in prayer. And as we have a time, probably of closing music, songs, I'm going to be in the back. If you want to start talking about what it looks like to follow Jesus, we can have that conversation today. I can stay as long as you need me. And if it's not me, talk to one of you, the leaders in this church. Talk to somebody you know has been following Jesus longer than you. Give them the opportunity to invest in you, because that's why God put them in your life. It doesn't have to be a preacher. Which one are you? The truth is, all of us need to take next steps in following Jesus, whichever one you're at. Because we sang it earlier. We sang in faith that I'll fly away one day. We need not to forget. And even though we fly away one day, it starts here with the declaration of what we believe in Jesus. We believe his faith living out obedient action of what he's called us to. And he uses that obedient action to build his kingdom. Regardless of which of the three, he's inviting you to make a kingdom investment. Will you accept that invitation? Let's pray. Father God, I thank you opportunity to praise your name. Thank you for worship music that you inspire with your word, with your story. But worship isn't just singing songs to glorify you, it's to shape our heart and minds, to live for you. And that's what kingdom investment is all about. For each one of us here, will you reveal to us where we are to invest in the kingdom? Don't allow us to play church. Call us to be the church. To be ambassadors of your kingdom as we choose to listen to your voice and obediently follow you. Whether it is those who might need to make their first decision to follow you, or those who have made that decision in the past, but they need to recommit today. Whichever place we find ourselves, we ask you to build your kingdom in us so that you might build your kingdom through us as your Spirit leads us. In Jesus' name.